All right, we have Samantha here talking about her fertility experience. We are just catching up a little bit before, and she shared with us that she's about halfway through her pregnancy with a little baby girl. And so, congratulations, Samantha. It's just so awesome to see you here, and thanks for taking some time to share your story.
Absolutely.
I'll just share a little bit about how we met Samantha when she came to us, and then I'm just going to let her kind of share it in her own words, and we'll just. I always tell people it's just like we're sitting down and talking with a friend because that's really what it's about. So when Samantha came to us, now you had an official diagnosis of PCOS. Is that correct,
Yeah.
Samantha? Okay,
Yes.
so PCOS, which we'll talk about a little bit because PCOS I feel like is such a big bucket, and we always try to break that down because there's not really one. Everyone with PCOS is different, but Samantha came. Her periods had always been irregular. I think varying between about 45 to 65 days. And you told us you and your husband had never not been trying, right? Like it was just kind of never prevented it.
Yeah.
But you got serious around 3 years ago. You went to
Mhm.
fertility clinic around 1.5 years ago, and immediately they were pretty quick to jump to IVF. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Oh,
we'll
yeah.
talk a little bit about that. I think you said, well, let's pump the brakes. They suggested metformin to regulate your cycles. Didn't sit well with you. So I'm gonna pause there and just talk about that whole experience because there's so much there about obviously, years into it, you go for support. And I mean, how did it feel when you kind of went to the clinic and that was their suggestion?
Yeah, and the clinic was, even though I'll tell my age, I'm 36, and, farther along maybe than most, in their lives. So going to the clinic, I already felt like I was behind. And I don't know if the clinic sensed that or sensed my anxiousness or my adrenaline of being there. I'm like, let's go. Like, I want to do something. Like, let's get this started. But I do think because of the PCOS and just maybe how the clinic was ran or whatever, however you want to slice it, the jump to IVF within 15 minutes of me talking with the provider was very off-putting. I've been one my entire life. I've been active, tried to eat right, collegiate soccer player, just been really plagued, or I've been living with, maybe not plagued because it's not a curse, it's just something that you deal with PCOS and irregular periods my entire life. So, I've always wanted to find why that's happening or what can I do internally to turn this around and to conceive naturally. And so, yeah, it was off-putting, and I, went to them obviously for the initial consult and then had a follow-up to go over other reporting, blood work that they had drawn. But really everything was just telling my husband and I think that we already knew. And so, yeah, it was really, honestly depressing because I'm like, is this our only option? Because they certainly made it seem like that. So we then took a step back and I started to research more as to, like you said, PCOS and kind of like this hodgepodge of things that it is, or things that it consists of, or how people feel or their symptoms related to that. And I just knew that there was more to the story, and I wanted to battle this the best that I could to take it into my own hands. And so that kind of led me through, the Enneagrams and the Instagrams and everything else, and found you. And yeah, so there we go.
Yeah, and so I mean, I think that's just such an important part of the process to talk about, right? Because I know that not every clinic experience is like this, thank goodness.
Mhm.
And some people have wonderful experiences with the clinic, and I hope that that becomes more of the norm. But unfortunately, many women and couples, when they go, it's just immediately, right? Okay, well, whether it is looking at a diagnosis on paper or an age on paper and just jumping to IVF, it's just doesn't sit right with a lot of people. And hey, if that's okay, like if that's the route people want to go, that's fantastic. But a lot of people listening here and going to listen to your story, Samantha, are ones that kind of want to take a step back and maybe think, okay, what else is happening here, which is exactly what you did. And so taking that pause is such a powerful place to be, even though it's scary and overwhelming and you're like don't even know what's coming next. It's such a powerful position to be in. So then let's talk a little bit now. When we started you came to us. So you did have the polycystic ovarian presentation via ultrasound, right? So we'd seen that collection of cysts on the ovaries, which can be part of a PCOS diagnosis. High AMH, which is also part of that PCOS picture. We had a high LH to FSH ratio, also a part of that. But you had within normal testosterone and insulin ranges, which is always kind of like a, hey, wait a minute, let's think about this PCOS picture, because most people get dumped into PCOS bucket whenever they have high insulin, high testosterone. And so for you, it wasn't the classic PCOS, even though, yes, it is officially diagnosis. It has to be addressed differently, because just going to that prescription of metformin may not have been like, okay, that's where when we were looking at your intake, we're like, wait a minute, she was given metformin, but why? She doesn't have the typical PCOS. So do you mind sharing a little bit about like how your experience was with that, with metformin?
Yeah. So I will say, to kind of take it a step back as to how I got on metformin. I had my annual exam with my OB, who used to work at this fertility clinic that I went to. And to let everyone know, I am from rural, or I currently live in rural North Carolina. There's not many options. So like, you kind of have to take what you can get without traveling to like a major city, which we just didn't have the ability to at the time. Anyway, so OB encouraged me. She's like, just give it another shot. She completely understood where I was coming from. And so I go back, and, then they put me on metformin, because I went in, kind of put my foot on the ground and said that we're not doing IVF for, and here's my list of reasons why, which they were amendable and acceptable too. So they're like, all right, let's take it all the way back into, like you said, Olivia, they then put me on metformin, because they're like, you have PCOS, and it's like, slam the metformin on the desk. And I'm like, okay. So that's kind of how that happened. So I gave them a second chance, and then they put me on metformin. It made me feel really wonky, because like you said, like my glucose, I've had my A1C measured multiple times. I've never been in those higher ranges. Or even really pre-diabetic ranges, like to elicit like, hey, like something's up with your glucose, and to your point, like your insulin has been fine. So it made me feel really wonky. I could never take the prescribed dosage. And so it was always, I always felt less than on it. And I always felt like, why am I even doing this? And so I'd taken it for maybe 3 to 4 months. And I just said, I can't handle this anymore. Like I feel like my blood has rushed out of my brain. So I pretty much told the clinic, sorry, I can't do this. And they were kind of at a loss for words. Like, I don't understand like why this isn't working for you. And I'm like, well, we're just gonna have to find another way. And so, which then that just intensified my search to find, knowing my personal experience, knowing that there were deeper layers to this than what anyone was really telling me.
Okay. Yeah. So helpful. Thanks for explaining that and really helping us to understand that picture. And then when we started together, again, we don't know. It's not like when people come to us for the first time, we're like, oh yeah, we know what's going on. They're like, all right, we got this, right? It takes time to clarify. And that is why that's the first part of our program, is clarify your story, right? And that is a combination of, okay, what didn't work for this person? What did work for this person? What haven't we tried for this person? What's our labs telling us for this person, right? So when we started with Samantha, it's all about clarifying this picture. And so when we're like, okay, we're seeing a couple things here. The one thing that we really wanted to bring in kind of a new approach or outlook to, or insight to, was the stress piece of this. Right. So Samantha, again, as she mentioned, like nutrition, she was freaking rocking it. Right. She really was doing amazing things that people think like, okay, dietitian, well, what are they going to do? Because my nutrition, like I'm healthy, right? Like I eat well. Taking that deeper dive here, really broke into this stress piece with Samantha. So I know you had told us right from the start, struggles with sleep have always been an issue. Exercise was your stress reliever. You were a freaking boss, babe. I mean, let's just be right straight up, like you rock it in your career. And also something that you put on your intake was experiences throat closing anxiety. Do you remember saying that? How does that make you feel right now?
Oh yeah. Those are times that I never wish to live again. Yeah. So that's the anxiety maybe not so much depression, but just completely anxious for very, very long periods of time due to situations and, like you said, job related. So yes, anxiety was very much a concern.
And so this is looking at her whole picture, right? Okay, yes, we have to understand her lifestyle, her resiliency to her, how her body handles stress, right? And so what we really started on protocol number one, I remember I'm looking at it right here, was we are going to address her PCOS, and along with PCOS, her irregular cycles, less than optimal ovulation, via her nervous system, via the stress system, not the typical metabolic high insulin, because that's not her. And so we can't just put her in the bucket. Addressing this via her nervous system. We looked at her Dutch. We really got great insight from the Dutch. We're working on even gut health in here, because slow bowel movements, a little bit of constipation was in the picture. We brought in targeted supplementation, but really finding her PCOS root, right? What was actually causing and contributing. And again, it's not like we have this all figured out in a second, but she was such an integral part of clarifying her story, bringing in this clarification. So then tell us, how did you feel with that? I mean, and I always encourage people to be really real about this. At the beginning of their journey, be like, okay, I don't know about this, Olivia. This doesn't really seem like it's all going to be that much. Or like, just tell us a little bit how you felt about those first couple of visits and bringing in that kind of different approach to something that really wasn't discussed before.
Right. It was intimidating because I knew that I was going to have to change things. I just knew that I was. There's a reason why my husband and I aren't getting the result that we desire, is because there are things that we need to change that aren't being changed right now, and we really didn't know what to do. So like there was the intimidation factor, but I think too there was a period of excitement, because I've really never been able to work with anyone that has listened to me in that regard, and to really map it all out. And I will just say, just side note, just since I've gotten pregnant, I've heard from so many of my friends that have had these struggles and know that I've struggled, pretty since my husband and I got married. And I just know, like, people aren't being heard. And so coming to you and like being heard and being able to lay out every single card plus some more, and ones that I didn't even know that existed, to your point, just to lay it all out, like that was the exciting part. So it was like intimidation and then like excitement.
Awesome. And I think that's huge. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think so many people feel like these cards, right? We'll say like the cards that you were laying out, they don't matter because like they're not connected, because we're so used to just thinking like, okay, fertility, right? Sperm, egg, testes, ovaries, like that's our cards. But really our cards are our lifestyle, our anxieties, our gut, our sleep, our exercise, like so many of these things, our symptoms, things we don't even know are connected because we're really not taught that. Is that kind of how you felt? Am I getting that right?
That's exactly how I felt. And my apologies. There's a train outside my window, so if you hear that, who knows? Okay, good. No one can hear it. That's great. But yeah, no, that's exactly it. So being with a qualified professional that can tie it all together and to be able to give me an action plan and a protocol that I can move forward with, that was what I was searching for. I mean, first, like above all, like that's what I needed, and I didn't care how long it took. If it took 3 months, kind of how long it took for us to get it, or if it took 3 years, I was willing then, after our initial conversations, to put in the work, because I knew what, not only like what you were capable of, but just knowing the success that you've had with other people to be able to do that. So that was so promising for me.
And I think it's finding what you're capable of, right? I mean, I think that's huge, I mean, oftentimes I think a lot of that is kind of stripped from us, and understanding our potential or possibility when we actually clarify our story to know what our bodies are capable of. Sometimes it's just like, well, I've done everything I know in my toolbox, so maybe IVF is the only option. But when we have other tools, it's like, oh, actually, I have a lot more to do in this picture than I was led to believe. And so I'm putting that capability one back on you. And really I think you just really own that. So now tell me a little bit next, did you then go back? Because I think this piece is so important to talk about. I love partnering with fertility clinics. I do. And many people, I think, when they find us, they're like, oh, well, if I'm working with Olivia's team, then it's all one way. And we're like, she doesn't like clinical. And no, it is finding that partnership that can be cohesive and blend together both worlds, if you will. So did you then did you go back to the clinic? Did you find a new clinic? Like, tell me a little bit about that next step in your journey.
Yeah. So I went back, and that was, some encouragement from, say, like you and Carrie, and some encouragement from my OB, kind of like all meshed together, just because there could have been the need for, say, pharmaceutical intervention, as well as all the other things that we were working on together and things that I was doing from a supplementation piece. So I went back, and they heard me out, and I was working with a new provider and at that same clinic, and they were very agreeable to kind of like work alongside of like the plan that you had set out for me and things that I was already doing. So, and really that first step was was going to be a medicated cycle to see, along with everything else that I was doing, to see what we could do with that.
Love that. I love it that you didn't burn that bridge. We're able to go back, have a different approach, be heard differently, have different information to go and empower ourselves with. So I think that's a really great part of your story. And I know that a lot of women will find that interesting and helpful, because it's not one or the other. It's marrying the two. It's bringing them together. Yeah. And so then, okay, I just love this. Anything else before I have a couple of my little takeaways that I think are so powerful about your journey, that I'm just going to highlight here because we come near the end. But what else, any other information that you'd like to share, or just like, your feelings through it all? Good things, bad things, anything you want to share?
A couple things, a lot of, obviously, like what I've already mentioned, just kind of like my path through it all. And, I've been the one sitting on the sidelines looking at everyone's posts and, having all the baby announcements and seeing and feeling discouraged. I'm like, what the heck is wrong with me? And it's not that there's anything, say, wrong with you. Like, you are not wrong. It's just things that you're currently battling with and have to navigate through. And I would just encourage people, like, if they feel like that they're not being heard, like I was, and it was like, all right, you have PCOS, this is the protocol. It's to find another avenue. It's, the World Wide Web is so vast of resources and people that can really be of assistance, and you've been a great help with that. But I think too, just the other part, it was really, we can call it divine timing, because I truly believe it was because of going back and working with the clinic and working with you, through the protocol of like, okay, we did all the labs that, say, my OB wasn't doing or the fertility clinic wasn't doing, and finding out levels of everything, finding out that it's more of a stressor response, more of adrenal PCOS compared to maybe more of the metabolic, which that was just like, we'll call it validation. But I'm like, that's it. Like, I don't know how, I felt not great, but I felt good about getting answers. So that was one. But knowing that, having, my supplementation protocol too, which was extremely beneficial, and I don't think where I'd be today without it. But I think going back and working with the clinic alongside of that was really, really the blessing. Because I'll kind of say, without getting too TMI, before they were going to start me on the medicated cycle, they came in and said, all right, let's do one more ultrasound just to see, it's been a little bit, let's do one more ultrasound. And they saw, and I think I've been working with you for about 3 months. And so, supplements were in there, I'm on it, in it to win it. And they saw like, oh, you ovulating. Like, if you're going to try this, like, today is the day. And I felt internally, I was like, okay, like, I think I'm ovulating, just based on different things that I was feeling, in my natural cycles, temp and all that good stuff. And so they're like, hey, it's either today or tomorrow, like, it's go time. And I'm like, well, I've heard this before. So, it was really timing, but like I said, it was a combination. So between working with you and having that protocol and working with the clinic and going in there and getting the ultrasound and knowing that and just praying to God every single day, like, let's let this work. And then almost being in disbelief when I'm not getting my period 2 weeks later after ovulating. And I'm like, this is weird. And then the clinic says, like, just take a test, like just to verify before you go on, you know, to jumpstart your period if you haven't, you know, started yet. And seeing those two lines, I'm like, this is God. But I mean, it's just the work that, you know, I put in, that we did together to really get us to where we are today. So that's kind of what led us to now. Kind of that moment, but I don't think it's being afraid of working with Western or Eastern medicine. Like it's knowing that there is a place for both, and just
And I
finding
tell
out.
people, like, please don't put, I mean, no pun in, I'll say pun intended. Don't put all your eggs in our basket. Don't put all your eggs in the basket. I'm just like, okay, this is the one way. Like, this is the only thing that's going to do it. Like, working with Olivia is, you know, that's the end all be all. Please don't do that. Like, please don't do that. We want a team. Like, the people that get most successes with us are not afraid to really reach out, partner with a clinic, re-establish work with the clinic, try again, knowing different information, work with an acupuncturist, you know, understand what we need, whoever it is, and we really help you to build that team. And it's just so important to really have that cohesive, comprehensive approach. So I just love that you're talking about that. And now one thing I also love about your story, Samantha, now, do you remember what day-ish, you don't have to remember to the specific day, but what day were you when you got pregnant on your cycle?
Oh my gosh.
I think
Like,
I know if you don't.
is it like day 60 or something like that? Yeah,
Mhm.
it was, yeah. Yeah.
Yep. And so I love this because people think too, something that I think gets in our mind is, well, I have to have the perfect period, right? I have to have everything going perfectly. I have to be perfect to get pregnant. If I'm having a long cycle, then it's not going to happen. It's not true, especially for women with PCOS. I don't care when you ovulate. You can ovulate on day 100 of your cycle. If you know how to track with, and I know it comes with its own kind of frustrations, but if you know how to
Right.
track your temperature and ovulation and really are able to determine when that's happening, it doesn't matter. You ovulate any day of your cycle, you can get pregnant, and you don't have to be perfect to do that. I know stress management is something that we're all continuing to work on, right? And continuing to improve on, and sleep and all these things, right? We don't have to have all these things line up perfectly and the stars align perfectly and bam, it happens. It's just helping that whole comprehensive picture to come into play and really just take little chunks of it at a time.
Yep, that's right.
So really powerful there. So yeah, just, I mean, I love that one, your instincts. You listen to your instincts and take it back to their understanding. You take that pause. You weren't quite ready for that big leap into IVF. Advocating for yourself, huge. Number two, I want people to learn from your story is that high or low AMH doesn't mean IVF, right? This is very another common, like, okay, AMH is high or low, bam, we need intervention. Not necessarily true. And number three, something so important, PCOS doesn't mean you can't get pregnant. It's knowing what type of PCOS you have and how to support that. That's the name of the game, as we just learned from Samantha's story.
Absolutely. That's 100%.
Incredible. Well, anything else? I mean, thank you so much, Samantha, for taking time out of your day and sharing with us. Anything else you want to share?
No, I think I laid it all out there. So
Did.
just encouraging people to get the answers that they know that they need in order
Mhm.
to work on themselves. So
Yep.
it's very much warranted, and it can go a long way, obviously.
Amazing. Well, I just so happy for you, and keep us posted on how you're feeling. And congrats. Thanks for taking your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.